5 years ago, the iPhone 4S was released, and now I am recording a video about the iPhone 4S on an iPhone 4S, where we are going to compare. So, basically, after 5 years, used iPhone 4Ss you can get as cheap as $60. But are they actually worth $60? How do they compare against actual $60 phones? Other phones include that we are going to be comparing are the BLU, which is BLU, stands for Bold Like Us, X8 HD, and the ZTE Maven 2, both of which cost $60 and are phones that are currently sold today. So the iPhone 4S has a different design approach than either of these phones. It is a more compact phone. The BLU X8 HD is 146 by 73.6 by 9.9 millimeters. The ZTE Maven 2 is 145.5 millimeters tall, 72.9 millimeters wide, and 10.9 millimeters thick. The iPhone 4S is the smallest in all dimensions. It is only 115.2 millimeters tall, 58.6 millimeters wide, and 9.3 millimeters thick. Now, these are curved designs against the more block-like one in the iPhone 4S. The BLU X8 HD weighs about the same as the iPhone 4S, a little less, but it's only 4 grams. 138 grams compared to 140 grams. And the ZTE Maven 2 weighs 166 grams. Remember the iPhone 4S's compact design? Well, that translates to a compact screen. 3.5 inches compared to 5 inches on these other phones. However, that does not necessarily mean lower resolution. The iPhone 4S has the sharpest display of any of these, with 326 pixels per inch and 196 pixels per inch on the ZTE Maven 2, 294 pixels per inch on the BLU Studio X8 HD. Now, but due to the bigger display, the BLU Studio X8 HD has the highest resolution of 720 by 1280, whereas the iPhone 4S has only 640 by 960. The ZTE Maven 2 comes out least with only 480 by 854. The camera is another thing to consider, and I can tell you that the iPhone 4S has the highest resolution camera of them all, 8 megapixels compared to 5 megapixels on the other phones. However, I do not have other specs, so I can't really tell you which is the best camera. I don't have a camera comparison, but I can tell you that the iPhone 4S has the highest resolution of them all with 8 megapixels. They all have an LED flash. The ZTE Maven 2 can only record in 720p, whereas the BLU Studio X8 HD can record in 1080p, and so can the iPhone 4S. Now, the front-facing camera is the worst in terms of resolution on the iPhone 4S. It is a VGA camera, whereas in the ZTE Maven 2, it is a 2 megapixel camera, and on the BLU Studio X8 HD, it is a 5 megapixel camera. Speed is definitely a place where the iPhone 4S falls behind in. Remember that optimization that iOS has? Due to planned obsolescence, Apple actually had the opposite of that in their latest iOS update. So the iPhone 4S is really laggy, and this is not helped by the processor in it. It is an 800 megahertz dual core, whereas the ZTE Maven 2 has a 1.1 gigahertz quad core, and the BLU Studio has a 1.4 gigahertz octa-core. However, the BLU Studio has 512 megabytes of RAM, and the ZTE Maven 2 has 1 gigabyte of RAM. The iPhone 4S also has only 512 megabytes of RAM, though. The storage is another thing to consider, and with the iPhone 4S, you could get higher storage options, but then you would have to go above $60. For $60, you can get 8 gigabytes of internal storage for the iPhone 4S. That is more than you get on a BLU Studio, that has 4 gigabytes, the same that you would get on a ZTE Maven, which has 8 gigabytes. Although the ZTE Maven only offers like 3.4 gigabytes of user storage, and pretty much the same for the iPhone 4S, the BLU Studio. I'm not sure about that, but the thing about the BLU Studio and ZTE Maven is that you could buy a micro SD card later on of up to 64 gigabytes to expand your storage. You can't do that with an iPhone 4S. The iPhone 4S also has a pretty small battery compared to these other phones. It has a 223. The iPhone 4S has a 1432 milliamp hour battery compared to 2200 milliamp hours on the Studio X8 and 2300 milliamp hours on the ZTE Maven 2. In terms of connectivity, we've got the ZTE Maven 2, a 4G phone, iPhone 4S, a 3G phone, and the Studio X8, a 2G phone. And that means that the Maven 2 is really high speed, but it is limited to AT&T. So it gets up to 150 megabits per second. The iPhone 4S is less limited as some other carriers. I'm not sure about all of them. I know it's US Cellular, probably Verizon, since that was available with the iPhone 4. And it is limited to 14.4 megabit per second internet, which is 3G. And since the Studio X8 is only 2G, that would make it limited to 480 kilobits per second. However, this is compatible with all 2G carriers, which is many of the carriers. So there are pros and cons to each of these phones. With the iPhone 4S, you get a compact design and a good back-facing camera. But on the cons, you get a small display, slow processor, and small battery capacity. With the ZTE Maven 2, or with the pros, you get a really fast speed of 150 megabits per second. You get some moderately good things like the speed, and the battery is almost the best. But you do have the con of the low screen resolution and the poor camera setup. Now the BLU X8 HD, it has many pros. It has the display, the processor, the battery, but it has 2G cellular, which is really slow. It has 4 gigabytes of internal storage instead of 8, which the other two have. Although it does have expandable storage, which is a pro for the other two other than the 4S. So, just weigh the pros and cons. Say the iPhone 4S isn't as good value, but if these are the things that you would prefer the pros in the 4S, then I'd say go for the iPhone 4S.